Okay, anyway, thank you everyone for coming and forgive me for being oddly in this corner, just gonna keep some juggling. Yeah, it's great to see everyone, this turnout. And it's my pleasure to introduce Gene Coleman. Anyway, before that, sorry, my name is Mark David Hosale. I'm professor here in computational arts, and I run the ND Studio Lab here at York University. And what am I going to say here? So this event kind of kicks off a series of events that we're running through the ND Studio Lab, starting with Gene's talk today. And then Friday at Charles Street Video, we're going to have an exhibition opening celebration with performances that will include performance work by Gene, featuring Amy Hillis, who's a faculty here in the music department, violin professor, and performance with Krista Valenti-Majeres and Javi Rida. And then also the GOO, Global Organoid Orchestra. And I won't go down that rabbit hole right now. And we'll be open all weekend. So Saturday we'll be open 12 to 8. There's a Fury block party. We'll be open 12 to 4 on Sunday. And then the following weekend we're holding a workshop, same workshop on both Saturday and Sunday all day, to work with the technology called the Source, which I think Gene will probably reference in his talk. Anyway, so this connection with Gene and the work that we've been doing in the Studio Lab has really been organic, and we've been kind of hanging out with Gene virtually for the last year and a half. And Gene's been using technology that's been developed collaboratively in our lab with Alan Macy in Santa Barbara. And I'd say that the concerns of this research are around things like neuroaesthetics, empathy, human connectivity, and like how we assert the normal trends of technology, which are tend towards disassociation, towards those of association. So Gene is a composer, artistic director of the Institute for Music and Neuroaesthetics, and a member of the Meta Lab at UC Santa Barbara. He has received fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the American Academy in Berlin, the US-Japan Friendship Commission, and the American Academy in Rome. He's created over 70 works for various instrumentation and media. Central to his work is the inventive use of sound, image, and time, and the desire to create experiences that expand our understanding of the world. Since 2001, his work has focused on the global transformation of culture and music's relationship with neuroscience, video, and architecture. Excuse me. His most recent research compositions explore the concepts of Neuro Music and Neuroaesthetics. He studied painting, music, and film making at the School of Art Institute of Chicago, where his teachers included experimental filmmaker Stan Brakhage and Ernie Geer, composer Robert Schneider, and visual artists Barbara Rossi and Oliver Jackson. In 2024, his album of Neuro Music called Exploratorium was released on the UK label Falls. And I think I got this a little out of order, but I want to mention, like, after the talk, Mazinani and I are going to join Gene with a little bit of Q&A discussion, which you're all invited to join in too. So, and Mani is a Toronto-based artist making installation, video, film, sculpture, photographs, multiple sound and music. His practice evolved from an early interest in sound recording, now working with the process of translating thoughts and recordings in various media. His visual work, it thinks about scale perception, often combining subject matter and medium.
Mazinani.
Thank you. Tongue-tied. Is currently researching origins of ancient thought, perceptual limitations of humans, and improvisation. Exhibition and performance history includes Evergreen Brickworks, MoCA Toronto, Tate Modern, the Benway Toronto, Tehran International Electronic Music Festival, and SIP Cultural Center, Suju. And it doesn't say here, Monty is also the artist in residence for Connected Points issues. All right, so without further ado, much ado, I'd like to introduce Gene Coleman.
Hello. Great to be here. Mark David, thanks for that introduction. I was originally going to be with you in person today, but travel complications emerged. But I will be there tomorrow, and I look forward to meeting with anybody who's interested in discussing these topics further, and perhaps maybe at the performance on Friday evening at Charles Street Video. So let's get started. The name of this talk, as you can see there, is Music Mirrors Mind. And it's the one of the basic operating premises for my work, which is simply the idea that no other art form other than music reflects the way the mind works, the way it operates, than music. And I'm no doubt some people could debate that for one reason or another, but there are so many musical metaphors used by neuroscientists to describe the activity of the mind, of the brain. So it's really there. It's a very clear metaphor. So let's begin. I'm a composer and video director with a deep interest in neuroaesthetics. One of the first chapters in the talk here is going to delve into what is neuroaesthetics. You heard Mark David already outline some of my awards and accomplishments, so I'll just leave it at that. At the bottom there is my website, genecolemancomposer.com, and I welcome you to take a look there. Okay, why am I here today? I'm here to share with you some ideas about music and neuroaesthetics. I'll begin with a short history of my influences in education, then a consideration of what neuroaesthetics means and why I think it's so important for the arts. Then I'll share some examples of my work, which I call Neuro Music, where I apply ideas from neuroscience in my compositions. The big question I want to explore is, how do we apply ideas and data from neuroscience to create new works of art? I will then talk about some of my current projects, including new works using what I call the Kata Neuro Music system and the Source, which Mark David mentioned. These are biodata technology tools for composers, musicians, and artists. Okay, influences. This guy, Stan Brakhage, American experimental filmmaker, he was one of my teachers at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. His films are extraordinary and made a great impact on me. One idea he wrote about a lot was the concept of what he called closed-eye vision, also known as hypnagogic vision. Brakhage was very interested in the idea of documenting his life via film, and hypnagogic vision was a way for him to represent the very abstract visual experiences we all have, but perhaps don't really notice. I don't know if he viewed things neurologically, but his idea of documenting the actions of his mind and body is very important. He wanted to reveal what is inside us, to make his interior experience the subject of his art. To the right is a still from his film Metaphors on Vision. In this film and many others, he collaged insect wings, plants, and painted directly on the film. Brakhage's aesthetics have been very much an influence on my work as a composer and video artist. The Criterion Collection has a wonderful anthology. It's like maybe 3 DVDs of his films, many of which are silent, by the way. Which was always a fascinating thing, that he thought that having an auditory dimension to his films would interfere with your perception of the rhythms that he was presenting visually. And it is an extraordinary thing, especially in some of his short films that, especially as a musician, you watch these films and you absolutely are filled with a sense of rhythm. He could edit in such a way that he absolutely could convey these very musical rhythms through visual, through montage. And he felt that adding sound to that would interfere with your appreciation of the rhythms that were occurring visually. But there's absolutely a synesthetic experience that goes on there, at least for me, because the rhythms are so palpable. You're seeing these rhythms, but you're feeling them, and they absolutely feel like music. Another big influence, Anthony Braxton, the composer and saxophonist, originally from Chicago. Um, I heard about his music very early on, like the first year I was in Chicago around 1980, starting school there. And Robert Snyder was one of my teachers. Well, it turns out Robert Snyder and Anthony Braxton were roommates at the Chicago Musical College. So Robert was a great source of information about his old roommate, Mr. Braxton. By that point in time, Braxton and some of the other, giants of the AACM had moved on to Europe and New York and so forth, but they did come back to Chicago periodically. So I did get to hear concerts quite a number of times. And anyway, Braxton was just one of these incredibly impactful, incredibly powerful, expressive musicians, both in his compositions and his improvisations. Um, the album on the right there, alto saxophone improvisations, I just use that as a kind of touchstone because when I heard that recording, I felt very much that this was like to me, what I felt from that was this was someone transcribing their thought through improvising on the saxophone. And I say that because there's this kind of jump cut dimension to the way he plays, where it seems like one idea appears and then he cuts to another idea, very cinematic in a way. And when I heard that, at least it reminded me of how I felt my own mind worked. And I think most people's minds work where you have a focal point, but then you have a lot of jumping around going on. Your mind is constantly switching between one thing and another that it's focused on. It could be what I'm saying right now, and a moment later you're thinking about where you're going to go to dinner. And that's just the nature of human consciousness. So anyway, his saxophone playing especially embodied this kind of quality for me. The other image you see there is from one of his scores. And this was one of the first opportunities I had as a young person to see music which was being composed in an unconventional way, that he was integrating not only normal music notation, but also these symbols and signs and so forth. And it opened up my mind to the idea that there could be different ways of actually putting musical ideas down on paper, and that they could incorporate different kinds of graphic concepts and so forth. So I found that very exciting. Later on, then I discovered much more about graphic notation and the various composers besides Braxton who engaged in that practice. People like John Cage, Pauline Oliveros, many others. The Italian composer Silvano Bussati did absolutely incredible work with mixing graphic notation with musical notation. So coming from this visual background, this was a big inspiration for me, the idea that this was one way in which the visual and the musical could merge. Another big influence is the Greek composer Yannis Xenakis. His approach to musical composition was revolutionary in applying concepts from architecture and mathematics. In Paris, he devised a computer system called UPIC, which could translate graphical images into musical compositions. In this way and others, he anticipated the concept of computational arts. On the right are drawings that he created and used in his compositional practice. So once again, this was the music itself of Xenakis is incredibly exciting and dynamic. So that's your entry point. And then there's all this fascinating stuff that orbits around it. The way he, again, used a kind of graphic system to transcribe his musical ideas, using his architecture background and also a very substantial background in mathematics. So those images they just amplify or magnify the interest that I have in his work. It's that sort of thing. Um, anyway, so this was another example of someone who's focused on music and the idea of composition, but is bringing all these other elements from different disciplines into that, which, as you may know, is quite different than how most composers work. I mean, most composers have a much more prescribed kind of uh, mode of operation. I mean, they may feel inspiration from different arts or literature or whatever, but they're not like, say, drawing their ideas on paper and then translating that into music. They're, sitting at a piano, playing chords and melodies and so forth, and trying to construct their musical ideas in that kind of way. And that's not a criticism, but it is simply to say now we have, a couple generations of composers who have completely rethought how ideas could be translated into music and how that creates a very different form of musical expression. Okay, now we get into this neuroaesthetics. And the question, is there more than one meaning of neuroaesthetics? I'm going to read some excerpts from a text called Neuroaesthetics and the Trouble with Beauty. This was a text written by Bevel Conway and Alexander Redding. Mr. Conway is a musicologist at Harvard University. And you can see now this is actually 12 years old. So, maybe some of the things he's saying need some updating. I'm not sure. But I think there's some very important points he makes here. Aesthetics has a complex history. The term derives from the Greek word perception and was coined by Alexander Baumgarten in 1750 as the study of sensory knowledge. But following Immanuel Kant's critique of judgment in 1790, aesthetics began focusing on the concept of beauty in nature and in art. During the 19th century, the term became largely synonymous with the philosophy of art. These three connotations, perception, beauty, art, point in different directions, but are often conflated in the term neuroaesthetics. And again, from his text, one potential danger in aesthetic projects is to universalize one's subjective convictions and assume that all experience of beauty is common. Projecting from individual subjective experience is deceptive, for there's ample evidence that notions of beauty vary between cultures and are mutable even within a culture. For example, fashion trends. Moreover, the equation art equals beauty rests on shaky ground. Throughout history, artists have created deeply moving artworks that are emphatically not beautiful. Goya's Saturn devouring one of his sons, the image on the right, provides a famous historical example. Large swaths of 20th century art have greatly expanded or entirely disavowed notions of beauty. I think I move my thing here so I can read this. Sorry. There will be a beauty instinct implemented by dedicated neural machinery capable of producing a diversity of beauty reactions, much as there is language circuitry that can support a multitude of languages and other operations. A need to experience beauty may be universal, but the manifestation of what constitutes beauty certainly is not. And here in Philadelphia, we have at University of Pennsylvania, the Penn Center for Neuroaesthetics. And here's their definition on their website for that, for what is neuroaesthetics. A subdiscipline of cognitive neuroscience concerned with the neural basis of aesthetic experiences, which involve interactions with entities and events that evoke intense feelings, often of pleasure. Okay, another person who I think figures very importantly in this neuroaesthetics or more generally aesthetics thing, the German composer Helmut Lachenmann. And the question, can noise be beautiful? A major influence on my development was working with the German composer Helmut Lachenmann. His concept of noise as a vital element of music made a lasting impression. Further, some elements of his composition style, which he didn't pursue for some reason, helped me formulate techniques that are central to my neuromusic concept. For example, in his second string quartet, he uses unusual bow movements, such as moving the bow in a square pattern. My concept of geometric actions originated from this, and I'll elaborate on that further. Okay, so this term neuromusic that I use, what is that? Doing a search of the web, there's no clear definition of this term as a form of music. One does find neuro music therapy, and while this is related, it is not about the creation of music using ideas from neuroscience. I define neuromusic as an area of research and composition based on the study and application of models and concepts from auditory neuroscience. Okay, now looking some history here. We have the American composer Alvin Lucier, and his music for solo performer from 1965 is one of the to this day one of the definitive examples of something that might be called neuromusic. So, history of neuromusic. In this work, the composer Alvin Lucier uses his brain waves to play various percussion instruments. It's interesting that some important composers who used EEG, brainwave technology, in their work are Americans with various degrees of influence from Japanese culture. The list includes Pauline Oliveros and Richard Teitelbaum. Also, the American composer David Rosenboom created many works using EEG or other models of the brain and the nervous system. So this is not an active link here in my presentation, but you can look this up, Alvin Lucier Music for Solo Performer, 1965 on YouTube. So that's what this still is from. And it's really a fantastic work. He uses only his alpha wave brain, he only uses the alpha bandwidth. And when he closes his eyes, there's a propensity for the alpha wave band to be enhanced. So he knew that was sort of a reliable way in which he could send an alpha wave signal. Those signals then went through a series of processing mechanisms, and then in the end ended up being the means by which a mechanical device could activate a percussion instrument, or I think there was also a piano. So the brain waves are directly responsible for activating these musical instruments that are sitting in the room with him. Um, and again, I mean, I was always curious, like why he didn't really do much more with this idea after that. I think there were a few other works, but it didn't seem to really become like a mainstay of his practice. Another person in this framework is the composer. He's known as a composer as David Soldier. As a neuroscientist, he's known as David Sulzer. And this work, Trio for Brainwaves and Percussion from 2008, three performers use brainwave data to generate sounds as they play percussion instruments. Um, Now, I mean, one could argue about the musical success, perhaps, of this as a composition, but it's absolutely fascinating demonstration of how the brain correlates with the body. Um, so what he had in part one, the players move their hands to play the instruments, but don't actually touch them, but the cortical brain waves trigger the notes. So he's got these guys wired up and their brain waves are being read, and he has some kind of MIDI controller or something that can take those waves and then actually, trigger a soundtrack from that. And the point there being that simply the idea of imagining that you're going to do something, even though you don't do it, they don't actually touch the instruments, but that is enough to, the brain represents the idea of the sound that way, and that this is kind of like the trace from that. So in the video, you see them just moving their hands, not touching the instruments, and yet this whole spectrum of rhythms that they're actually producing with their hands are heard. In the fourth part, the players imagine playing and try to move their hands while sitting on them. So that's just taking the idea that much further, that simply imagining doing something is powerful enough in terms of our circuitry to send out this set of signals that can, make those thoughts completely tangible. For time considerations, I'm just going to skip over this video because it's a bit long to get to the point. But I believe this is something you can find on the internet. Next up, Pauline Oliveros, the sonic meditations and deep listening. The sonic meditations are a series of scores created by the American composer Pauline Oliveros. In her meditation project, Oliveros used EEG, brainwave technology, in conjunction with scores to study the effects of her music on performers. The project also studied Buddhist meditation practice, Tai Chi, and karate to see how these disciplines might reveal new connections between meditation and music. This led in later years to her concept of deep listening, her own form of meditation music composition. Over time, the ideas and music of Oliveros have become very influential, and her Deep Listening Institute has students from all over the world. The intersection between Buddhist and mindfulness meditation, music therapy, and neuroscience are all combining in her work. Here's a lovely little thing from this Sonic Meditations. It's a collection of mostly text-based scores. So here's one of them. It says here at the top above her image, take a walk at night. Walk so silently that the bottoms of your feet become ears. Another person with some very interesting ideas along these lines is Peter Pasek. And I'm referring specifically here to his book, Polyphonic Minds, Music of the Hemispheres. In this groundbreaking book, Mr. Pasek looks at the history of music from a neuroscience perspective. In the chapter called Tuning the Brain, he considers the idea that basic brain functions are very close to music in their behavior. Thinking of the brain as a self-regulating system made of many interconnected parts, he suggests that this system controls itself through electrical feedback mechanisms of consonance and dissonance. Comparing this to polyphonic multi-voice music, he sees very similar things going on. Further, we see so many examples of music as a metaphor or analogy for brain function. The list is very long. For these reasons, I've come to think that no art form more clearly mirrors the action of the brain than music. Okay, so along the way to where I'm going here, I wanted to interject that architecture is another important influence on my work. And I mentioned Xenakis and was an actual architect who then, kind of morphed into a composer. These are some images from my 2013 composition called Sendai Transmissions. And this work is based entirely on the architecture of a building in Japan by the Japanese architect Toyo Ito. It's the Sendai Mediatek as a kind of a media center in the city of Sendai. So on the left side here, you see an actual image from the building. It has these incredible vortices in it. And then I made a drawing kind of based on that. And below that, then you see one of the early representations of how this spiral form could be translated into sound. That's not an image from the final score, but it's again part of my process of representing ideas visually as I slowly work towards the final version of what the musicians would actually perform from. The upper image here on the right is a photograph that I took of the building on the ground floor. I was particularly struck by the way he used glass, and he creates so many incredible layers of reflection. So you have the things from the street and things inside the building all like kind of reflecting against each other. And it creates this really amazing effect where you start to be completely unsure where you are spatially. And then here is a video excerpt from the final work. So this is a composition for an instrumental ensemble with video projections. And the video is entirely comprised of images of the building itself. I worked with the Japanese cinematographer Hirokana Hanaka on this work, and it's his amazing cinematography that's on display here. The musical ensemble here is my group ensemble NJP, which is composed of traditional Japanese instruments and so-called Western instruments, as well as electronics. Okay, now we're going to get into some more specific things about some of my methodology. Um, what you have here are two images from a text by Lloyd Watts, Reverse Engineering the Auditory Pathway. So Lloyd Watts is a very interesting guy. He's a math and science guy who came out of Caltech and was recruited into a company, a research company by Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft. And so he had about 10 years working in this company where he was given a lab and a team, and what he wanted to do was go deep into studying the function of the inner ear, the cochlea. And at this time, which I guess was in the 90s, there really was a surprisingly small amount of information about how the cochlea actually worked. And one of the reasons for that is that there's such dense bone mass around it that it's quite difficult to get a look in there. You know, with even with MRI or certainly X-rays, it's quite difficult. So anyway, he was given the opportunity to do extensive research on this, and so because it was a private company, there's very limited information that actually came out about that research. But I was able to stumble on a few things, including this. So at the time, about 10 years ago, I was kind of looking around for some things. I mean, I was very interested in trying to find ways to work with some ideas from neuroscience. And I can't remember exactly the circumstances by which I came upon this thing, but the reason I showed you the previous slide is because, coming out of this period where I was thinking very much about architecture and how to translate architecture into musical forms, I found this image. And it is a representation of the different areas of the brain which are involved in auditory processing. And so this work that Lloyd Watts was doing led to this kind of understanding, which didn't really exist previously. So if you read this thing kind of from top to bottom, you have the cochlea, you have the ears, the cochlea, and then the lower brain stem. And so it moves up until you finally get to the top there, the so-called frontal networks, which are where the so-called highest levels of human brain function occur. This is the neocortex, very, advanced levels of thinking and so forth. But this representation, this way of representing this was so fascinating to me, and I just instantly locked into this because what it looks like to me is an interior architecture diagram. So the notion of representing the auditory pathway in this kind of way was very inspirational for me. It was just something I could instantly connect with. So I saw that the image on the right is where I've written in some things around that same image, thinking about ways in which each of those compartments could be translated into some kind of a musical idea. So this was really a breakthrough moment for me in terms of thinking about how ideas from neuroscience could find a way to become like a musical expression. And then here we have an even more detailed diagram, which is a further deep dive into the different kinds of programming circuits that the brain is activating in regards to auditory perception. So it starts to go very deep. Um, and this diagram shows a much more detailed picture of the pathway of all the circuits that interconnect. The various stages move up from the bottom, where you see the drawings of the ears, as I just said, to the frontal and conceptual networks at the top. The image created by Watts suggests an architecture of the brain, which I found very inspirational. Another image here, this is auditory pathway model, which particularly shows the phenomenon of parallel processing in the brain. So this we read from left to right. And I've numbered these stages. You have what are called the mechanical phases of hearing, which is first you have a sound, a vibration of the air, and then the outer ear, the pinna, catches that. You have the middle ear, which is the tympanic membrane, and so forth. So sound is moving through these stages into the brain, and then here, that would be stage 13 or 14, we suddenly have this mushrooming expansion of circuitry, which is being activated simultaneously. So it's just very interesting visual representation of how many different parts of the brain start to interact with each other the further the auditory process, goes. Okay, so this is Geometry of Thinking is a piece for solo cello, which was my first work to employ the models of the auditory pathway as defined by Lloyd Watts. Also, the models of action potentials as defined by Eugene Izikovich in his book, Dynamical Systems in Neuroscience. The drawing on this page shows the notation I developed to describe sound in the various action potentials, which I call synapse bowing. So again, what you have here is these would be vertical movements of the bow on the cello. And of course, the bow is not normally moved vertically, so you don't get a normal sound when you do this kind of activity. But it was a way in which I could immediately or very directly translate an action potential form into something in sound. In Ezekiewicz's book, he shows, I don't know, something like there may be 20 or 30 different models of these action potentials, all of which have different waveforms to them. So that actual waveform that occurs in that action potential. They all have a different character to them. And so that can be in a way transcribed. So this was one of the first things where I thought I could, really take something very directly from scientific data and translate that into a musical situation. Jumping back to Lockenman for a moment, this is his work, Salute for Caldwell for two guitars. The geometric lines above the staff indicate the performers move their hands on the strings accordingly. I call this a geometric action, and it creates a sound that conveys the visual shape. It is a unique form of synesthesia that I began working with in 2004. Later on, I realized how it could be used to express the idea of audio scene analysis in my compositions. So you see there, he's drawn a graphic above well, in this case, a set of 16th notes, and there's this square line there and so forth. So this was something I picked up on and utilized. So here we have my second string quartet, which is called Returno, composed in 2019, commissioned by the Prometheus Quartet for the Chigiana Music Festival. In this work, I explored the application of my models of auditory neuroscience, the auditory pathway of the brain. The work uses music from the opera Returno by Claudio Monteverdi. The music is treated as a source code, which is subject to my audio pathway of the brain models and is transformed by them. Shown here is page 22 of the score. And I'll note here, I write my scores by hand and then combine it with computer graphic and text applications. So just looking at this briefly, if you look at, for example, bar 126, that's the fourth bar on the page here, you can see these musical notes, and then there's a triangle drawn through them. So what that means is that in the space of one beat, the performer has to move the bow in a triangular shape on the strings. And how this relates to this idea of audio scene analysis is that this creates a situation where moving the bow in this geometric way creates combinations of signal and noise patterns. In the case of the triangle, there are two movements of the bow which generate noises because you're moving the bow up the string, so it doesn't produce a normal sound. So two signals that are noise, and then the third signal is the bow finally moving across the string in the normal way. So combining circles and ovals and triangles and squares and pentagonal forms as well as figure eights, I have a kind of vocabulary of physical actions which involve different degrees of signal and noise combination. And this is, I think, somewhat similar to the way in which the brain processes auditory sound. It's like a process of, kind of weeding out what it considers to be noise within the information band it's receiving and trying to finalize or objectify what the sound actually is. So this is one of the ways in which I try to apply that idea within a composition. Here's another page from Returno, which shows examples of how I use geometric actions to represent audio scene analysis. In the first bar, all four instruments draw square shapes on the strings. In the second bar, there's a combination of spirals and ovals, and in the third bar, a mixture of normal notes and pentagonal shapes. As you move from one bar to the next, the degree of noise in the signals change, becoming much less by the third bar. This allows the underlying source code, which is music from the opera Returno by Claudio Monteverdi, to be heard more clearly. Okay, and now a short excerpt from the piece performed by the Prometheus Quartet. Oh, sorry. I blew that by touching that thing there. We were just entering the last page there. Sorry about that. But time is requiring us to move on. Last page here from Returno. Again, further graphic representations of synapse bowing here. And then here, the page you just saw, we'll hear a bit of this. So these are examples of the synapse bowing I was talking about. Okay, I'm just going to talk about this briefly because time is tight. Transcultural music is another area of my practice. I define transcultural music as an area of research and composition based on the mixture of music from different cultures and traditions. In my works, the emphasis is on timbre, sound color, and noise to change or dissolve boundaries between different forms of music. My main groups that explore this kind of music are Ensemble NJP and the Transonic Orchestra. My interest in this idea evolved from my first residency in Japan as a creative arts fellow of the US-Japan Friendship Commission in 2001. I had a deep interest in Japanese and Chinese culture since my teens, including reading many books on Zen Buddhism. The way consciousness is explained in Zen was very influential on me and no doubt enhanced my approach to this concept of neuromusic. Okay, then there's a few slides here now about my composition Kata, which is a work that is combining these Japanese instruments and electronics and so-called Western instruments. This was a work that was commissioned for the Tokyo Olympics in 2020, and regretfully, due to the pandemic, it never got performed, and then we got funding to record the whole piece. So it at this juncture has only existed as a kind of music video work. Here's a short excerpt from it. Okay, and this work is particularly relevant because the work that I'll present on Friday relates to some of this very much in that it's utilizing wagara, which are these traditional Japanese patterns, and also images made by the Italian neuroscientist Camillo Golgi. And you saw both of those things being mixed there in the video. I'm just going to read this briefly. This about Kata, a docu-opera, a multidisciplinary composition combining martial arts, traditional Japanese music, and neuro music and video. It explores the relationship of our physical and virtual worlds, one that is rooted in concepts of Zen and recent developments in neuroscience. The Kata team developed motion and brain scan technologies that help show the deep connections of the mind and body. Working with models of auditory pathway architecture manifested as wagara, Kata creates a world that bridges traditional Japanese and contemporary cultures. Another video from Kata, which I think for this presentation, I'm going to just jump over this because there's some other things I want to get to before it gets too late. This I will play for you, though. This is page 30 from the score of Kata, and you're going to hear the music being played here. So take particular note of like the string quartet and all these different geometric things going on with the bowing. And here's what it sounds like. No? The last thing you heard there, that last bar, that was the string quartet was playing these notes using a figure eight bowing movement, which I think it creates a lovely feeling of looping. Okay. Transonic Orchestra, I mentioned, is one of my other projects. We're not going to delve into that right now. Kata Neuro Music project. So this is in reference to the technology that we developed to utilize in the composition kata. So this predates my collaboration with Mark David and Alan Macy. What we did in this case is we actually took a device that's made by a company in Toronto there called Muse, and one of my colleagues, Adam Bedixis, opened that thing up and hacked into the software of it and made it something that we could utilize for more specific purposes. I have a little demo video here, which is this is the cellist Tom Krenes playing some music of Bach, and while he's doing that, we're reading his brainwaves using this hacked Muse device. Okay, and here's another video which is giving another demonstration of the kata device. We'll play a bit of this for you. So in our original conception for the piece, we were going to utilize this data in some way during live performances of the work. Again, because of COVID, we never had the opportunity to actually try to deploy this technology within the composition. But in more recent times, I met Mark David and Alan Macy, who you may already know. I'm sure you know them, and the company Biomichi and the device The Source. So this is the last chapter we're going to be looking at here, which involves some quick information about what I'm trying to do with their technology. Starting with a quote from an email that Alan Macy sent me. Perception, interoception, affect, emotion, and thought are linked recursively. These interconnected systems are the basis for new forms of artistic expression. And I think that that's an incredibly great way to sum up my neuromusic concept. And here we have an image from an onboarding session for the source at Temple University, conducted by Kavi and Mark David. Pictured here from the left is Adam Vidixis, composer and director for the Center of Music Innovation at Temple University, Michael Kaplan from the University of Pennsylvania, and Sam Wells, composer and assistant professor of music at Temple University. So Biomichi has been kind enough to provide us with some devices, and these three gentlemen have been conducting their own individual experiments with the technology. We have a program planned for Philadelphia in April of next year where all three of them, as well as myself, will be presenting new works utilizing the source. Here we have a page from the score of my composition Forest Minds from last year. This work is scored for 4 voices, environmental sounds, and neuroelectronics. This work uses the biodata device, the source. The output of the device is shown at on the bottom stave with breath, heart, and brainwave data transformed into sound. I do have a recording of this. I haven't put it in this talk yet because there's some issues with the audio quality. And another one of my collaborators from Europe is Francesco Bigoni, composer, technologist, and director of Siena Jazz. In these videos, Francesco explains how he used the source in my composition Forest Minds. So again, given the time, I'm not going to play these videos right now, but if anyone's interested in seeing them or learning more about how Francesco and I, use the source in that composition, I'll be happy to share those with you. Now, this is a page from the score for the piece that's going to be done on Friday. This is Geo Neuro Echo, Toronto, scored for electronic sounds, neuro video, and a conscious, subconscious violinist. This work uses the source to record reactions to electronic sounds, which are shown on the top 2 staves there, and use the biodata to transform a series of wagara, traditional Japanese patterns, and images created by the Italian neuroscientist Camillo Golgi, whose work you saw a bit earlier in another video of mine. The work explores the dynamics between the conscious act of reading a score and improvisation, which relies much more on the subconscious mind. And it's more than the mind at work here. So interception is as important as perception. My idea is to animate the images with biorhythms from brainwaves, breathing, and heartbeats. The images move with the rhythm from the biodata. The images are distorted and transformed to suggest that they're happening in the mind, as if we're seeing something imagined or in a dream. The Wagara patterns are similar to the abstract images in hypnagogic closed eye vision. The data sets are used to transform images at the corresponding points in the soundtrack. By doing this, we hear the sound and we see the transformation of the images by the biodata. The images only appear at certain points in the piece. This creates an audio-visual counterpoint between the soundtrack, the live violin playing, and the neuro images. And the last 2 things here, there's the cover of my album Exploratorium. You can check that out on the UK label False Walls. There's also a Bandcamp page for that I can share with you if you're interested. And last but not least, some images from our home in Italy, which we intend to use as the home base for the Institute for Music and Neuroaesthetics. This is in the town of Bolano on Lake Como. You can see there the lovely view of the lake and mountains. So we've unfortunately had some delays in the renovation of this house, so it's still not ready. But I look forward to the day where my colleagues there at York University and the University of Santa Barbara and Temple University, that this could be a place for us to come together, consider neuroaesthetics, work on projects together. Small scale conferences could occur there as well, etc. So it's something to look forward to. And as I said to Mark David earlier today, to contemplate something like neuroaesthetics in a place which is so incredibly beautiful just further enhances, I think, the opportunity to go deep into that as a subject. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks everyone. So, yeah, we're gonna kick off a little chat. I'll also join in, of course. Yeah. All right, can you see us, Gene, or?
I can see you in miniature there, yes.
Okay, perfect. So, and I assume everyone can hear us in YouTube land, so, right. So yeah, I asked Mani to kick things off. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think a good place to start is actually where you end, talking about the natural beauty of this future home for the project. And natural beauty is kind of one of the things that's universal in human experience. That's like something that we can share an appreciation for. And I was wondering if you could speak to the concept of a universality in neuro music, neuroaesthetics, if it's going to be the basis of a kind of new direction of art making. Um, how do you see that concept playing into your work and the connection to neuroscience? I was, yeah, I wanted to I'll end my question with a bit of a quote from one of the research articles that I came across in preparing for this conversation, and the neuroscientist was explaining kind of how I set it up with natural beauty, describing that our brains are more similar than they are different.
Mhm. Yeah. So I think there's something really important here for sure, which is, the idea of the commonality of our makeup as human beings, this neural circuitry. Um, and I think especially at this point in time, it's really important for us to get more tuned in on that. So basically, like everyone understanding the nervous system and the mind much more deeply than most people do now. And art could be one way in which a deeper understanding of this kind of thing is transmitted. On the other hand, we have to keep in mind that, I mean, the our minds, are never just blank slates. So it's never just the mechanics of it. It's then what fills that up, So as we become more and more specific in our lives through our individual experiences, this also, impacts all that neural circuitry. And so I mean, I think it's particularly interesting to think about something like nature, Mani, as you were pointing out, maybe, nature more than, let's say, any manifestation of human culture. Maybe that's like something where there could be a more uninterrupted kind of connection between our mind and body and the environment. And I think that would be quite an interesting thing to research further or look at further. But it is the case that, as we have our experiences, our very specific experiences within certain cultural frameworks, living in a particular place and time and so forth, that this alters everything about our experience and our perception of the world. So we become, what we are through time that way. And I guess the question there would be like, does our experience of nature somehow go around our biases and things to some extent. I think that'd be a very interesting question to ask.
Yeah, that's so about beauty. I mean, obviously seems like the central topic uh, to this work, and so inevitably you end up in this like kind of rabbit hole conversation about what is beauty.
Yeah.
And yeah, one of the things the way I think about that is that beauty is tied to nature. That is something that feels like
Hmm.
kind of intrinsic, but that as humans have moved through history, our understanding of nature is changing. So, like, for example, the ancient Greek view of nature is that of proportion and purity, and actually that, that when they would look at the world, they would see things that not everyone, because they disagreed about everything, but they would, like, if you look at something like the Parthenon, which is based on the golden ratio, this is some idea of like an idealistic view of beauty and nature that they're representing, and they're trying to like put in that pure form. Whereas without getting to a big lecture, if you think about all these like paradigms through history and different cultures and the Renaissance in the Middle East and what was going on in East Asia and everything. And then you come to today with like modern science, we have a different view of nature where we can, and there's all, like you're bringing up Kant, there's still like this world that is still the noumena, the unknowable, but the unknowable is always changing. And as that, so we can now see like the infinitely grand, like black holes and quasars, and the infinitesimally small, like quarks and hadrons, and because of that, I think that's also can explain why we get interested in things like noise and patterns and systems, and as a way of like understanding nature, as opposed to, we also still appreciate golden ratios and things. So there is that universality, but there's also that complexity of, our perception and understanding and knowing that's moving as well.
Right. Yeah, I think there's something quite beautiful about tuning in on the ways in which the brain works, the nervous system works. And I think that's, you know, understanding that in some ways is quite useful and quite beneficial. I think it's like understanding something about yourself as a human being. And that's where a commonality can occur. And it seems to me like at this point in time that would be great for more people to get tuned in on that, sort of appreciate and understand that dimension. Because, for example, it helps explain some things about, why people behave the way they do, and it's a bit like, having some understanding about that puts the world in a different perspective. And maybe particularly at this moment with what's going on with artificial intelligence, the idea of redefining what is actually human experience. It's maybe a moment where that's perhaps more important than ever. Because like what I'm talking about is like the summation of these nervous systems, the experience of that. And that's, of course, a world away from what artificial intelligence actually is. So if we're to think about what human experience really encompasses, it's something so much more deep and complex than just, this idea of an algorithm representing some way of computing a formula or coming up with an answer to a question. And maybe by understanding more deeply our own mechanisms and the interconnection of them, it makes it easier to kind of comprehend what we really are and not be kind of dragged into this, I think, kind of illusion that AI is some kind of replacement for humans or human experience.
Yeah, AI will have a lot of trouble understanding the concept that came up in your talk of a beauty instinct.
Uh-huh.
But anyways, perhaps we can go on to another topic. Given your background in the various art forms and especially the way you've practiced music both as a composer and improviser, I'm wondering if you could speak to the duality of improvisation and composition and how that plays with your concepts.
Yeah, thank you. This is particularly important to me because I really got into music from like a free improvisation basis. I mean, I studied music in grade school and high school. I actually didn't really enjoy it all that much, and I quit. And at the time, all through that time, I was much more focused on my, dream of being a visual artist. So that was sort of the primary thing. And it was only later after I came to the School of the Art Institute to study painting and drawing and so forth. And then I heard the music of Anthony Braxton and got completely crazy about that and was buying his record albums and so forth. And then I started meeting a few people who were interested in that music, who were doing these kind of informal improvisation sessions in people's houses and so forth. So that was my re-entry into a musical world, and it was now completely based on just improvising. So I did that, and then later on more interested in composition, and I created a number of works where I was combining those two modalities in various ways. So it's an idea that's interested me for a long time. What I would say now, like my perspective on it has really changed in the sense that for the longest time, there was simply composition and there was improvisation, and there were ways to try and combine them, as say Anthony Braxton does, or as I would try to do, or many other people. But those terms were sort of self-sufficient. It's like, well, composition, that's where you're writing something down and someone's reading something, and improvisation is to more or less a degree something where you're kind of making something up, and those are kind of the working models of it. And what's different now for me is the idea of thinking about these things in relationship to the mind more specifically. So I would define these things as more connected to consciousness and subconsciousness, for example. And that's what this piece, Geo Neuro Echo, is trying to delve into to some degree. So if we think about improvisation then as something that has more to do with the subconscious, and composed music or music, you're reading from a score, your conscious mind is more engaged. And that's not to say they're completely two separate fields, but there's, I think, no question that if you're reading music from a page, your mind and body are activated in a different way than if you were simply sitting there with your instrument and, spontaneously making something up. That's where the subconscious comes in. That's where the subconscious is playing a key role that it's not, doing when you're reading a score that someone's written. So this kind of dynamic has really become very interesting to me, and it's allowed me to kind of reconfigure the way I think about these things. And I'm interested to delve into some works that are going to try to do more specific things with those ideas of you know music, consciousness, or main consciousness, improvisation, subconscious.
So maybe we can open it up to the audience a little bit, take a couple of questions. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Well, maybe I'll ask one more then. I was curious if you could comment on the intersection of the work with neuroaesthetics and music. I mean, it's clear it's there, and transcultural music, and how they
Yeah,
help each other.
right. I think that these are like threads that I'm still looking to combine or define further. But the work kata that I shared some examples of was something where I was really trying to bring those different ideas together in some way. But I think that for me there's a lot more work to do in that regard, because I got interested in this. This is just my terminology, transcultural. Other people use different terms or whatever, but this notion of trying to draw from different musical cultures and create something original is an idea that just interested me for a long time. And so in 2001, when I had this opportunity to go to Japan and stay there for 9 months, I was able to, really immerse myself in another culture's musical practices. And that was, an extraordinarily great experience. And I'm still collaborating with people that I started working with at that time. how that will find its way into some kind of neurological definition or phenomenon, that that's for me, that's yet to be seen, but I certainly think there's correlations there. I mean, for example, what kinds of emotional reactions might subjects have between, say, hearing a koto and hearing a cello. And of course, I mean, a lot of that is going to be, tangled up in what the experiences of the listener are. If they've never heard Japanese music, then they're going to, have a different kind of reaction to that than if they've heard it before, or they really like it already, or this kind of thing. So, but more generally speaking, the idea of creating musics in the future where people, go deeply into different kinds of traditions and then find new ways of combining those things. I just think that that's a very interesting and exciting future for music, as opposed to this kind of endless categorization of music, which, serves the music industry and thwarts creativity. It thwarts new ideas about how to combine things because, if you do that, then it's not a good marketing concept, blah, blah, blah. So, people being able to operate in a way where um, they can absorb these ideas and then combine them in new ways, that's the kind of future I would hope for music to have.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to wrap it up there because then the digital media folks have a party to go to, and their holiday parties tonight. And yeah, thank you so much for your talk, Gene, and for you joining us, Vani. And yeah, too bad you couldn't be here in person, but soon enough. And
Yeah.
it'll be exciting to see you here. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate it. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Yeah, see you.
Thank you, David.
Yeah,
Thank you,
see you.
Gene. Thank you, everybody.
I went to the gym before and ran further than I've ran in like, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.